Let's take a look at chord break number 2 on pages 22 and 23 of the textbook. This chord break is going to help us to learn and get practice with the C and G7 chords. We've previously worked on the E minor and G chord. Those are called common finger chords because, if you remember, they share a finger. The C and G7 are what we call common shape chords. We call them that, as you'll see, because the shapes remain relatively similar even as we move. So let's go ahead and work through these two chords. To play C, we'll go ahead and put our first finger on the second string at the first fret. We'll put our second finger on the fourth string at the second fret. And we'll put our third finger on the fifth string at the third fret. When we play C, don't strum the sixth string. Omit it. So we'll strum strings 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The C chord. Now let's learn G7. To play G7, you'll put your first finger on the first string at the first fret. You'll put your second finger on the fifth string, second fret, and your third finger on the sixth string, third fret. G7. For this, you'll strum all 6 strings. As we look at changing between these two chords, what the strategy that we want to utilize will be is how to move as little as possible, even though there aren't any common fingers. So if we go back and place our C chord, what we see is to get to G7, our second and third fingers will each move to the next lower strings, from strings 4 and 5 to strings 5 and 6. At the same time, our first finger will drop down to the first string. So if we go very slowly from C to G7. And what we want to practice is, at first, making these motions very deliberate, but gradually doing them simultaneously and picking up speed. So we'll start out and do our C. We'll move second and third finger. We'll drop the first finger to the first string, G7. Back to C. Second and third finger will move. First finger will go to the second string. Practice that over and over to start to build up the feeling of what these chords will feel like and what the change will feel like. Go ahead and pause the video. Practice slowly playing C to G7. Now we want to start to do these as a progression. And what we want to do is, if you look, the first progression on page 22 has us strumming 4 C chords, 4 G7 chords, and back to C. We want to eliminate any pause between these chords, which means that that change is going to have to take place very quickly, and that motion that we just practiced is going to have to take place simultaneously. We can't move fingers 2 and 3 and then 1. We have to do them both at the same time. So I strongly suggest starting out very slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Change. Change. Let's do that one together. 1, 2, ready, go. Change. Change. Go ahead and pause the video and practice the first chord progression, and then we'll tackle the second one. The second progression gives us 2 quarter notes followed by a half note. So we actually have a little bit of time to prepare our change. So again, once we do change, we change quickly to that G7 and quickly back to C. So for progression number 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 2. 2. Let's do it together. 1, 2, ready, here we go. Go ahead and pause the video, practice chord progression number 2, and then we'll move on to progression number 3. So, progression number 3 is the most complex of these three. This is on page 23. What this asks us is to do what's called a bass strum progression. So what we're going to do is we're going to play the bass first and then follow that with 2 strums of the chord. The bass note is the lowest note of each of the chords. So for our C chord, our bass note is on the 5th string. For G7, it's on the 6th string. So what we're going to do is we'll play the bass note, strum twice, change, bass note, strum, strum, and then back to C. I'll demonstrate. 1, 2, 3. Let's try it together. 1, 2, 3. I like to practice this pattern by repeating each single chord 4 times. So I play the C chord 4 times, bass, strum, strum, bass, strum, strum, bass, strum, strum, bass, strum, strum. Then the G7 4 times, and finally resolve on the C. It gives us a very common pattern that we hear in a lot of country music, especially from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'll demonstrate. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and pause the video, work on your bass strum strum with C and G7, and then we'll move on to notes on the 3rd string.